And I remember as a kid just feeling like all I want is people to like me and have friends. And so if I'm vulnerable, people don't like me. And they shame me and they outcast me because they don't not comfortable with it and whatever. So I'm not blaming anyone here. I think it was just our level to feel and to receive that type of emotion as kids. We weren't trained that way. At least I wasn't trained that way.
It's interesting because, I have 5 kids and 3 of them are boys.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are girls. And they're all like young adults and upper teenagers. So like we're up there. And, I lead women. So that's my community is almost entirely women. And so I spend a lot of emotional energy dissecting the narratives we were handed as little girls, helping us unravel some of these tropes that we were expected to just fall in lockstep with. But being a mom to sons who are now 17, 18, and 23, I am dead serious. The narratives handed to boys just as destructive.
Of course.
Just as destructive. And I know it because I raised real human kids. Like, I watched them go to their bed and cry for 3 days after a breakup. I've watched them write love poems.
Oh, man.
I mean, they're tender.
I was the biggest sap. Yeah.
Tons of boys are.
Of course.
It's not a true thing that boys aren't.
Right.
But this,
they're conditioned to be hardened.
You are.
And not show emotion.
And because you even pretended.
Of course.
It wasn't real for you, but you pretended. And so
I feel like I had to survive.
Totally, I believe
that was
you.
The thing. It was like you're either going to be authentic and have no friends.
Yeah.
Was either the narrative or the truth, whatever I was telling myself.
Yeah.
It's how it felt.
Yeah.
Or you put on a mask. That's why I wrote a book called Mask of Masculinity, because a lot of boys did this to belong, to feel like you belonged.
Of course.
Even though it's a false sense of belonging. I think that's hard. And it takes courage to say, okay, I'm going to be alone, and like maybe I find a friend or not for my high school life, and maybe a girl likes me or not or whatever, and I got to be comfortable in my own skin alone. Hopefully, you attract some friends that understand you and you understand them, but I don't know what it's like today.
I don't know. I don't know if you've got your finger on the pulse of like teenagers and young adults right now. I definitely do. It's my world, and I feel a little hope. That some of these gender stereotypes are reversing in a million ways. Like, just in a million ways. Like,
for good or bad,
gender and sexual identity, of course, that looks completely different now than it did when you were in school, and even when I was in school 10 years older than you.
What's acceptable, what's not acceptable.
You get to be who you are now. More or less. You get to kind of be who you are in your body. And I'm hopeful that some of this is folding in on itself. The good news is there's a lot of role models to look toward now. I'm not sure that there were that many when we were growing up.
This is what I talk about all the time. I was like, I never saw an example of a man who'd been sexually abused. Publicly talking about it.
That's right.
Especially like an athlete archetype that looked like me, that was like the jock and whatever, like that played sports. There was never someone that went on TV and was like, I was sexually abused.
That's right.
And here's how to deal with it. So I didn't have a model. And I think a lot of boys didn't. I'm not saying it's easier for women, but I feel like for men, it was like
zero
model. And again, maybe it was there and I just wasn't able to see it, but I don't remember seeing it. And so when I opened up at 30 about it, I still was like, I feel like I'm the only one in the world because I just never seen it. Or maybe I was just resistant to seeing it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I know Oprah did something with a bunch of men at one point.
I was just going to mention that.
But I didn't see that.
The first I ever saw that in my life.
Exactly. And I don't even think I saw it because I wasn't watching Oprah at that time growing up. And so it's like, unless you're seeing it consistently, it's hard for us to like connect to any type of shame or vulnerability that happened to us, with sexual trauma or divorce or whatever.
Yeah.
If you never saw anyone else get divorced, you'd be like, my life is over.
That's right.
If I'm the only one. Yeah. And so
this goes back to that like positive contagion, because I'm sure you've seen this in your life, having been so vulnerable as you are, shared your story with such like tenderness and open-handedness and in such a public way. I can only imagine how many men have now come to you and said,
hundreds of men have emailed me essays about them opening up for the first time. And it was when I started opening up like 7 years ago, I guess, I had this emotional hangover for months because I didn't know how to handle the essays that came in from men saying, I'm 55, I've got, I've been married for 20 years, I've got 3 kids, my wife doesn't know. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Oh my gosh,
you
it's
know?
heavy.
And just receiving it and feeling it, it's like, man, for months, it took me a while to like emotionally get back to kind of baseline. And I think, I mean, we all need, whether it's men needing to talk about their traumas, women talking about their traumas, we all need a place where we can feel safe to talk about it.
Yes.
In general.
Yes.
Communities, groups, forums, whatever it is.
It's not that complicated.
Right.
Like as we look at all this pent up rage and trauma and absolute suffering that people are walking around with, turns out sharing it with people is a pretty low hanging fruit solution.
It's not expensive.
It's not.
You don't have to go anywhere to do it.
It's effective immediately.
It helps release pain.
It's really the solution I think we're all looking for.
Yeah.
It's just tricky because somebody has to go first. You know?
It's so hard to go first. The courage.
Somebody has to go first. The courage. But then it's exciting because it's such a ripple effect. Like what you have set off in the lives of all those men. You know that so many of them went back. They told their wives. They told their children.
They started to heal. And
they went to counseling.
Yeah.
They did the work. Their friends started to come to them and say, me too. Thank you for saying that. I've never told anybody. It just, the effects of that, the domino effects are really so powerful. We can all do this. This isn't just the work of influencers. This is just the work of humanity.
It is.
I believe in that. I really believe in that. And I think setting that example constantly for our communities of sincerity, of tenderness, of vulnerability is probably more powerful than we'll probably ever even know.
Yeah, I know.
You know, that that sort of courage gets seeded in the hearts of our people, and we just don't even know what they go back and do with it.
Yeah.
It's exciting to think of.
What do you think is the biggest challenge that women face today? Women in their women after their late 20s face today, whether they're single, married, and have kids or not, but just a generation not in school, after school.
Man.
What is the biggest thing that women get to let go of that they're holding on to?
We're somewhere in the middle of a lot of shifting, which is exciting. I feel like I am both a member of a generation getting to watch in real time some incredible shifts for women.
Right.
By any measure.
When did this start? What was the catalyst? Was this pre-Me Too? Was this feminist movement, Me Too?
Yeah. And it would be unfair to ever say, it just started on our watch. We owe the women before us a huge debt of gratitude. Generations before us, our moms, our grandmas, our great-grandmas.
They went through crap.
They went to the mat. They went to the mat.
I'm not trying to laugh at it, but it's just like they had to go through a lot of crap.
Oh my gosh.
For the world to get to where it's at now.
The gains that they made, at the base level, created ultimately a foundation for, I think, our generation, not just to stand on something sturdy, but to climb. Really, it's exciting.
Right.
And of course, two of my girls are daughters. I've got a 20-year-old, I have a 14-year-old. And watching their age group, I'm like, oh, it's a completely different day. What
are they doing that's different?
They're unafraid. It's interesting.
They're like, I can do whatever I want.
They're just
I can
not
create.
afraid.
Yeah.
They are smart. We've been telling them since the day they were born that they're equal to men, that they are just as smart, that they are just as capable, that they can do anything. We've been telling them that since they were on a bottle. And they believed us. They believed us.
Right.
And so they are growing up with these dreams that are not encumbered by fear and by sort of feminine stereotypes as much as we did. They are absolutely not interested in joining the patriarchy as a co-conspirator, right? As just a submissive partner to the patriarchy. No, thank you. They'd rather be single. And
find a conscious partnership or a conscious relationship.
And the boys are kind of coming up like that too.
Right.
So it's interesting to watch some of the deep, painful work of the last few generations really take root right now. That said, still have a lot to do. Pay parity is still a disaster, and we can't have this conversation. I can't even speak for women personally because I am still so incredibly privileged. I live in almost every category that's favored except being a man. I'm white, I'm straight, I'm charismatic.
That's debatable.
It is debatable. It honestly is. I make money. I'm educated. I have the look. So
You have no state tax. Yeah.
never moving. So, I mean, when we start talking about like the pay disparity for women of color, when we start talking about what it looks like for Hispanic women who are at the absolute bottom of the pile, you know, we have a long way to go. We are still not there. I'm hopeful and excited to begin to watch what our representation looks like at the government level shift. It's more women than ever right now representing us. That's good because we're half the country. So it would make sense that we would see more women in leadership in state and federal government. And so for me, that's incredibly exciting to watch those numbers just tick up every single election. That's going to matter. That's going to matter. Our girls are watching that too. Having women's voices at the table, particularly women of color's voices, is going to be an absolute change agent. And so we got to keep our foot on the gas, but we are. So that's the good news. This is a really fun time to be a woman in leadership because my colleagues that kind of do more or less what I do, we're sort of in this work together. What in the world? Best women on earth.
Yeah.
And so that these are the role models for my girls, I'm hopeful, incredibly hopeful. My girls don't know that they're supposed to play it small.
Yeah.
That would never occur to them. Yeah.
That's awesome. And what would you say is the biggest limiting belief that you get to still let go of?
Me?
Yeah.
Me personally?
Personally.
How rude. How dare you ask me personal questions on your podcast?
The one that you feel like is, maybe you're not even aware of it, but something you feel like it's going to keep holding you back from your greatest self if you keep holding on to this limiting belief.
That's a great question. Probably, I would say that a limiting belief that I continue to kind of cling to is that some of the choices that I've made historically, some of the ways that I have related to important people that I love, kids, are going to, I'll never be free of them. I'm going to pay the price. I don't even know what the price is yet. I'm still waiting for some of those shoes to drop because remember how I'm in charge of everybody? And that something about my life is going to hit a ceiling because of things I got wrong. I still think it. I tell people not to think that. I tell people it's not
But
true.
you're still thinking it.
But I still think it.
Wow.
I still think that some of the ways in which I failed myself, I failed other people, things I didn't know, practices I didn't have into place yet, ways in which I could have responded completely differently are going to somehow bend the arc of possibility.
Really?
Yeah. For other people, for myself, and that I'll never really have full absolution from it and be like, I just didn't know that yet, as Chris would say. I just didn't know that yet. So I still worry deeply that I've gotten enough wrong that I'm going to pay for it.
If your daughter said that to you, what would you say to her?
I know, it's absurd. I hear it. I hear that coming through her mouth, and I'm like, you're acting crazy. You're acting crazy. This is just 4+ decades of conditioning for me. I grew up in a Christian subculture
What's a subculture mean? Of Christian?
meaning a subculture of our greater culture at large. So it has its own set of rules, its own operating procedure, its own hierarchies, which are very well known. Girls at the absolute bottom. And one of the things that I learned early on in 100 different ways was that girls were responsible for the bad behavior of others.
Oh, wow.
Girls were responsible for the bad behavior, particularly of boys and men. And so if you were harmed by one, what were you wearing? Did you have a spaghetti strap on? You know, what did you say? Because
So the blame was back on you.
always. And our system reinforced that because men were always protected and victims were blamed and ostracized. So
Is this the Christian community you're talking about?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I learned some pretty destructive messages pretty early on that girls and women were responsible for their own bad choices, and they were also responsible for everyone else's bad choices.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is. It's deep. It's deep root. Hard to pull up. And so that's still a largely patriarchal world.
How does a Christian woman who maybe was raised with the similar beliefs still love their faith, but let go of the beliefs of the religious that held them down and made them play, well, not made them, but influenced them that it was their fault?
It's a great question.
How do you not get out of that and say, well, I'm just not going to be a Christian?
Yeah.
Or do you just say that and say, I'm going to set a new standard for myself, a new set of beliefs that work for me and my family and my life?
Yeah, that's it.
Without making someone wrong or bad, but...
If you kind of peeked into this subculture, as I called it, particularly around my age, more or less.
Which is what, like 31, right?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
You got it. You nailed it.
Yeah.
You would see this whole generation of people who are going through or considering going through this sort of spiritual deconstruction. And talk about painful. Laying some of that down is terrifying, and it feels like is this bad? Am I betraying something precious? But one thing, I've been doing this work for years, and so I'm on the other side of that quagmire. But it's not the very beautiful, loving, beating heart of faith that I'm pushing hard on. It's the systems.
Right.
It's the structures. It's all the man-made stuff wrapped around it that was obviously, just like any other system we have, steeped in white supremacy, steeped in misogyny, power, privilege, hierarchy. It's no different than any other system we're looking at right now with critical eyes. And so having to really do this work of integrity of parsing that out, it's challenging.
So hard, right?
It's really challenging. Like, what goes and what stays, you know?
Is this why you feel like some of the younger generation is like, I'm just not going to church?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I'm just learning other spiritual practices on my own and not being in a system?
The data is unambiguous. The next generation, having already been taught to question systems, having already really, frankly, been very let down by authority. They've been let down by their parents. They've been let down by government.
Right.
They have been
religious leaders.
let down by the religious leaders and by the religion, period. And so they're a little bit more, they're critical thinkers at an earlier age than you and I learned to be that. I didn't move into critical thinking until I was grown.
You just obeyed the rules?
Of course. I was an A+ girl. I mean, you give me a rule.
I was like a D-, but I was like, try to...
I loved rules. I loved it. Give me a rule. I never met a rule I didn't like.
Wow.
And so I was set up to flourish in that system on the outside, but I died on the inside.
Yeah.
And so that is that's a heavy lift, but a good one. And what I've discovered is that I have emerged with so much less shame than I grew up with. Because shame and fear are the two levers to pull. They work too. They're powerful incentives.
Absolutely.
And belonging. Shame, fear, and belonging. Those three things, you just can touch the button and it'll work.
Yeah.
And so setting aside the concern about I'm going to lose my belonging, I'm afraid of this, and I'm ashamed of where I'm at is wow. But it's freedom, I'll tell you that. It's exciting. Feel really free in that for sure. And so back to your original question, that's a limiting belief of mine because I learned it I used to go to church 3 times a week as a fetus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So those are deep, deep, deep waters for me.
Wow.
So I don't want to paint the picture that I have managed all 46 years of life without any suffering, because that's not true either. We have really been through it in our family. This was a whole new level. And so, sometimes you find yourself in a moment in your life where you're like, do I mean what I say? Am I just full of it?